morning. Welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this 20th day of June 2023. And I want to reintroduce the guests here in studio. We have Dr.
Farah Maalim.
Sorry.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Farah Maalim,
still doing the project.
Member of Parliament for Dadaab. Good morning.
Morning, how are you?
Good to see you. I'm all right. And we have Richard Onyonka, the Senator of Kisii County. Good morning.
Good morning, my brother. How have you been?
I am well.
You went missing in action.
No, I've been around. I just took a short break, but I came back like 1 or 2 weeks ago. Okay. But it's good to see you this morning. And of course, like I said, we were expecting Gladys Boss, and she's unable to join us. She just sent a message this morning. And of course, the show has to continue. When you look, waking up to the coverage on the two dailies, the front page of the Standard, you'll see the story. Moses Kuria, CS with a loose tongue, attacks media. Truth Cabinet Secretary is a poster lesson fund terrible of Kenya Kwanza government using uncouth language against people or institutions, pointing out government failures and scandals. Will the president bring him to order is the question that the newspaper is asking. As Azimio plans changes to Ruto tax bill, the opposition has planned a two-pronged approach to the finance bill where they are pushing for 8 amendments they hope will get support even from Kenya Kwanza legislators. If that fails, the coalition will move to court to block the implementation of the new taxation measures. And you see two quotes from John Mbadi and Kuria Kimani basically talking about the proposed amendments. And another story there, Minister cracks whip at NHIF in fraud probe, the probe that we just saw there in the news. On the front page of the Daily Nation, moment of truth again on the story of Parliament this afternoon, that is the National Assembly, on the expected voting to some of the proposals in the finance bill that is on the Daily Nation. Edible oil scandal is another story that we've just aired there about media players call out Kuria for attack on Nation Media Group, and cooking oil, baby food, whiskey locked up shoplifting surges in tough economy. I want us to begin by looking at the place of media freedom within the Kenya Kwanza administration, because yesterday and the previous day we've seen the comments by the CS for trade and of course investments in the country, that is Moses Kuria, but also halfway backed by the Deputy President, who says that he agrees that the media has been unfair to the government, but says that he does not agree that there should be a denial of advertisements. Honorable Farah Maalim, with your experience that you've had in politics and leadership in this country, it is not unusual for a government to be uncomfortable with a bit of media reporting, especially when it's not in their favor. But have we gotten to this point, open threats of denial of advertising revenue, and what would appear like direct intimidation from state officers?
By its very nature and the history of democracy, media is never non-partisan. To expect media to be independent and just give a fair reporting itself is to say the least, inability for us to understand exactly how this works. I do understand that we're in a democracy, a budding democracy. Look at in the U.S. today, the Washington Post, and what was the other one called? The New York
Times.
New York Times. One is very left-leaning. Yeah. The other one is right-leaning. Fox News and CNN. Fox News is conservative, extremely right-wing, pro-Trump, and everything else. And CNN, the other extreme. And you don't expect what do you call a democratic government to give advertisement to Fox News. You get my point? They will not do it. And the same also applies to CNN. The likelihood of Donald Trump government supporting and promoting CNN is far-fetched. It never happens. So I don't see anything wrong with a media house having a biased information, biased what they call reporting, but they should not run away from the facts. So if an incident happened, they should report the incident the way it happened. But for their own editorial policy, the editorial policy, everybody has a right to assume any editorial policy in line with the political persuasion of that particular organization. For example, I know you're the Citizen. One media house that I respect so much was pretty much on Azimio's side, early days. And I don't see anything wrong with that. And whether you get, now the government has got to weigh in terms of advertisement, where would the maximum impact be? If in that consideration they feel that they can still do business with the devil, they do the business with the devil as their own choice. But if they feel that this is the one which is pro our side and pro this regime or pro this administration, it's the right to do that. So if she says we're not going to give you business, he's the maverick, he shoots from the hip. Every administration has got somebody like that. You know what I mean? I mean, Donald Trump one time was being questioned by a CNN guy, and he told, I don't want to answer your question. And he engaged in a diatribe, with the same media house, journalist, and even called him names, you know what I mean? In a sense, basically trying to denigrate his position. So I don't see anything wrong with what CS Kuria said. I don't see anything wrong with the people he's, admonishing and castigating media houses if they have a biased reporting, particularly editorial policy that is not favorable to the government. It's their right to do that. So you have to leave. You see, once you set the rules of the game, we're calling ourselves a democracy. You understand my point? We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have to play by those rules and not see anything wrong with that.
But are you bothered by some of the insulting comments that he's been writing on his social media accounts, some that I can't even repeat here? How about that for us?
Let the public make up their mind whether they want to have a government that has somebody like him. You know what I mean? There are certain people. For example, go to the US today. There is the LGBTQ side and there is the other side. When Museveni says, you have gays here, I'll put two of them in the same cell and expect them to have a pregnancy at the end of it. You remember, let's see who is going to get pregnant. That might look obnoxious and might look very derogatory in the eyes of the proponents of LGBTQ. But for people like us who are opposed to it, like myself and Onyonka, we applaud him and we say, yeah. I mean, these people should have a dose of they bring us that nonsense. So we don't see anything wrong with what Museveni said. Are you getting my point? So if you are there and he calls names, and because he is on the other side, why do you find anything wrong with that? There's also the other side who says all sorts of names against the government. You see what I mean? I mean, look at the social media. So you
don't have a problem because the conduct of the CS, I mean, even constitutionally, there's that provision that it should not bring dishonor.
No. You see,
to the office they
when
hold.
when we go to governance, dishonor, your own definition of dishonor is not the definition of somebody else in dishonor as a dishonor. You see, you can't force people to see things in a way that you see it yourself. That diversity of opinion and political persuasions and ideological persuasions is the nature of democracy. You understand my point? Okay. So if somebody calls you names, well, fair enough. I mean, somebody else on the other side is calling the other side names. You know what I mean? I mean, you see people, what do they call the current president, previous? Arap Mashamba, you know what I mean? All sorts of those things. Do you say that person was bringing dishonor to the government because this man was a deputy president of the country? Is an office, you're going to, the presidency itself has got to be respected. The other side, you remember one time Raila Odinga saying that this is a government of a thief and a drunkard. You know what I mean? Conductor ni mwizi, na driver ni mlevi. And he basically meant Uhuru Kenyatta ni mlevi, na conductor was Ruto at that time is a thief. You got my point. And people applauded at some stages out there. And who would go out there in a public, place and call him Kehe. You get my point. So
Honorable Faramalim, can we not repeat?
It's not a good thing.
Can we not repeat that?
Yeah.
Can we not repeat that? We just engage on what you're talking about media freedom and the place of the comments by the Cabinet Secretary.
Yes.
And Senator, do you see a problem in that? Of course, we know Moses Kuria and the kind of politics he likes to play, but how much is enough?
First of all, good morning. Thank you.
Good morning.
The point that I think we are dealing with is the way I look at it is not on what the Americans would call the First Amendment issue. It's not about discussing democracy.
Rights, yeah. Basic rights, yeah.
The ability of anybody to say anything, so long as it doesn't injure somebody else or another institution. But what I'm very, very uncomfortable about is that it's not what Moses Kuria said. No, that is not what is worrying me, even though it's an issue that I think we need to look at, because at some point, if you have a CS in the government and he decides to pick a fight with the media, what happens when there is a transition from that criticism being purely words to that criticism then metastasizing into with, like it has happened in the US. You have now media people being threatened. You have, historically that the media houses have been targeted because of either issues of democracy, human rights, and whatever. So my very sincere and honest observation is that, to me, Moses Kuria is a very, very good friend of mine. I've been in parliament with him. But he must carry himself with a certain level of decorum and a certain level of respect. And the reason for that, when I look at it, is that even when he may be saying certain things which may not be very good things or very positive things about what is happening in government right now. Right. What is the fight about, Sami? The fight is that there is a scandal coming up about oil. The CS decided to get very upset, and he threw out epithets and is attacking the media that is investigating that scandal if it is there. My feeling is, yes, Moses works in the KK government. Yes, he has a right to say whatever he wants. But I think that his position as a CS in government comes with a certain responsibility on what he must say, when to say it, and most probably how to say it. Right. I think for me, when he says certain things and for what reason, and especially the fact that the media is, the nation is actually investigating this corruption scandal, I find it unconscionable and unacceptable. I think he would have said, the media, yes, you brought up this matter. I would like to make a request to yourselves that please make sure you get your facts, make sure you present them, and make sure you have a watertight case. Because if that is not true, and you are mentioning my name, you know the consequences in terms of legally what I can do if you defame me, or if you spoil my name over the same. I think for me, I mean, I'm a senator from Kisii County. There are certain things I'll say here, Sami, and there are some things I can't. Right. For the simple reason that we are leaders now, and there is a public expectation on what we can say, even when democracy allows us. Even when I may disagree on, or I may not have any direct inkling, like or dislike. I'm using that to make my point about the LGBTQ. The point I have is when somebody decides to take that thought about this somebody's sexual suasion and decides to say that, in fact, if I had an opportunity, you can even kill them and shoot them dead, then that for me takes a different dimension. But if you're going to criticize somebody for him having his sexual engagement whichever way he wants, so long as it doesn't infringe on my rights, which are religious, which are legal, then really it's none of my business.
Okay. Yeah. So do you think, because there's a story on the Standard saying that will the president bring him to order? Is there anything for the president to react, especially in the perception of the government, or rather of the people on the administration?
You would make an assumption that whoever that has raised this story here is trying to kind of bring it out to the president that your troops are most probably ending up with, the epithets that the CS is throwing around, where it's a matter that is coming to the public, and how the public is going to react to it, I think for me is critically important. Right. And some people in politics right now would make an assumption that the president would call CS Moses and tell him, please stop saying such things or attacking the media and whatnot. But what if this is something that the president wanted to be said?
Okay. Yeah. And Honorable Farah, even as I hear you, because you're keen on democratic principles and rights, Article 34 of the Constitution talks of the freedom of the media, that freedom and independence of electronic, print and all other types of media is guaranteed, but does not extend to any expression specified in 33(2), which I'll shortly read. Then the state shall not exercise control over or interfere with any person engaged in broadcasting, the production or circulation of any publication, or the dissemination of information by any medium, or shall not penalize any person for any opinion or view on or the content of any broadcast, publication or dissemination. And up to that extent, I mean, when the CS goes ahead to threaten that any person who gives business to the Nation Media Group will get fired, isn't that going against that constitutional provision?
It goes both ways. It gives the media the freedom to take any position they want, editorial policy and everything, criticize whatever they want. And you know, and then it also gives also the government also to have its own unfettered position in the manner in which they want to. It's an administration, by the way. There's a difference between the Republic of Kenya and an administration of that time, a regime of that time. You see, the First Amendment in the U.S., as Onyonka, the son of my very good one of my mentors, we were together in the 7th Parliament with his father. And one of the finest minds I've ever seen in this country. And I have every time I see him, I remember that sage. I was in a parliament in which which side of the divide we are from is irrelevant when it comes to good minds. The content was too much. Now the divide is just divide.
Now there's no content.
There's no content now.
There's no content.
So let me now tell you. You see, the First Amendment was basically the freedom of, you know, government cannot regulate religion. Anybody can be of any faith, and you know, also there was the fear at the initial stage that the anti-federalists, you know, there was a unionist and there was a confederalist, yes. And the fear was that now that the unionists had won, and you know, Lincoln had won that war, the American Civil War itself, that there's going to be a lot of laws. So this more or less stopped Congress from enacting laws that were going to be partisan. Yes. And then, of course, there was the 14th Amendment, which is the due process. Our Constitution is elaborate on all that. What it tells you right now is that victimization means you victimize, you arrest people, you take them to court, you create laws that are essentially unconstitutional. You know what I mean? Which, of course, the ruling party has the capacity, they have the numbers. They can come up with laws that are punitive against certain areas, and somebody will say the law is the law. But then the Constitution now regulates that House of Representatives, and in our case, the National Assembly, not to make certain laws. We can't make those laws, they're unconstitutional. But as for the conduct of the government, that's the independence of the three arms of the government. When somebody says he's going to go to court, hogwash. We have a problem also in the legal, what they call fraternity. We have all sorts of quacks who basically were failed lawyers who are judges right now who want to try and, you know, what you call legislate from the bench. You can't. You can't legislate from the bench. So Parliament, the courts have absolutely no right to get involved in Parliament. So for somebody to say that whatever law that's going to be passed in Parliament, we're going to go to court to go and contest it, it's nonsense. You can only do it if that matter is brought before you because somebody has gone to court against the government for certain legislation itself, which is enacted in government, the enforcement itself, and somebody can say that cannot be enforced on me because it's unconstitutional. It's only then. But right now, to anticipate and to come out and say Parliament cannot make this kind of laws, it's nonsense. It's none of their business. They don't understand the basic Marbury versus Madison, which essentially, let me just finish. You know, sometimes it's good to educate Kenyans on some of these things. And also educate the ones who are assumed and believed to be educated. They are not that well educated in some of these areas. So Parliament can enact any piece of legislation. Finance bill. The principal functions of a government is to pass money bills.
You know,
everything else, I want you to listen to me, you know, when I'm talking, when I'm saying this.
Yes, you're moving faster than the question. And we'll get to the point of...
you know, we have one problem we have with the media. Yes. As somebody is trying to take across a very fundamental issue, the same media guy is only thinking about the next question he's going to ask.
No, no.
Don't think.
That is not what I'm thinking.
And understand what I'm telling you.
Honorable Farah, listen, I was asking you about the conduct of the Cabinet Secretary for Trade and Investment. Now you have gone to the next topic, and you'll get...
that is actually, that exactly is what I'm talking. What I'm saying is that his dismissal, his recruitment, his deployment, and the money which is going is purely the business of the administration of the day. If the president, in his own wisdom, is convinced that this man is okay, he can do what he's doing right now, there's nothing in law to stop him from saying that. He has the freedom. The same way the media has the freedom to report and say, castigate the government also has a certain freedom that you cannot take away from them. You can't force them into a straitjacket and say you must, what do you call it, advertise with Citizen or advertise with Nation, or advertise with... They do it the way they want. The same way the Democrats cannot go and advertise with Fox News. And the Republicans in the US cannot go and advertise with CNN. You have to understand that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Let's try and study how democracy has worked. Ours is a budding, what do you call, institution. We're only 60 years independent right now. And that has always been through crisis. We're trying to find our place in life. Although we are the best, one of the best in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. But still, we have a lot to go. So what I'm trying to say is that if he decides that he's not going to give any business to his citizens, so be it. The next government that will come will do differently. When Kibaki came in, is when all those big banks you can see, like Equity and God knows Citizen and all of them, when SK Macharia tried to put up Citizen those early days under Moi, you know what he went through. And the paper industry, you remember that paper industry and the rest of it. But of course, when the change came, he got his favorable, what do you call, administration, and that administration promoted him very much and promoted a lot of other things. If in the list, through policies. That's why some of them have become very big. You get my point. You can't blame Kibaki for having, during his period, for Equity to have become the big it is right now. It's one of the biggest right now in the country. You know what I mean? The same way these people have their own policies. If they want to promote certain areas and in the same certain fields, and they have a problem with certain, they have a problem with Citizen, they have a problem with Nation, they have a problem with that, but they don't have a problem with God knows what, any other media house, and they feel that their ideological persuasion and their political, what they call, manifestos is best articulated by these people who have an editorial policy that's favorable to them, and they promote them. So what's wrong with that?
Okay, I hear you. Yet, Senator Onyonka, I mean, because the resources, one CS Kuria is talking about that they should not go to advertising for certain media house. These are public resources. And how to get advertising business is through procurement, public procurement. How then does a minister pronounce himself on the podium, political podium, and make such expressions? Should any government officer who is involved in procurement listen to what he's just said on the fear of being fired?
Even when there is a right, freedom of speech, the ability for the minister to say whatever he wants to say, the truth that exists and the reality that is there is that whatever that such a minister is going to say and how he says it is going to have consequences. In my observation, the interpretation I'm giving what Moses Kuria is actually doing is that he is weaponizing and he is basically creating an environment where he is weaponizing the ability of media houses to get themselves, first of all, to fear. Secondly, to be exposed in such a manner that the media houses are going now to have a second thought. In other words, that is how I interpret it. Yes, they are free. Yes, you can write whatever you want so long as it doesn't affect the legal aspect of whoever you are writing the story about. But should you, as a CS, tell a government or tell Kenyans for that matter that you people, if you're going to write a story about how we have a scandal and this scandal is actually about oil, which is edible oils and stuff like that, and if you continue writing these stories, then we will not allow you to do business with us or with anybody else. Why? Because we feel that you are right. You have a right to remain silent, not to write a story about corruption in Kenya, so long as you continue benefiting and getting these arrangements from the current government, and to make sure that the government gives you that capacity. And it is true. I think, Sami, the minister is okay. If he feels He's attacking of the media. And for me, this is a very commonsensical thing. If he feels that he's going to start talking about how the media is biased against the KK government, and the KK government, in fact, the media should be saying how wonderful it is and how there's no corruption, and this government has done fantastic things. And if you don't want to write what these fantastic things they have done, and therefore you are attacking and criticizing them, which the Constitution allows you, then we'll not do business with you. My argument is, so be it.
We can promote you because you're not promoting us. So it's fair. It's a fair game.
It's fair game.
Because you're not entitled to this thing. It's not an entitlement.
But I'm saying there's a difference between...
It's a choice. That's why politics is a choice.
There's a difference between a legal argument and a moral argument. The legal argument, Moses Kuria will win. The moral argument, he will lose.
Okay.
Which is in terms of the public mood and the public feeling. That is how I look at it.
Let me now go straight to that. And I'm very happy that Onyonka Jr. has mentioned that. And that's exactly what it is. When the government makes wrong pronouncements and they make wrong policies, it costs them in the ballot box.
Absolutely.
In the next 5 years, after the next 5 years. But we as opposition cannot expect to run the government. That's what we try to do. We're going to demonstrate out there. They have the numbers. If they have the numbers in the parliament and they win, so be it. We wait until we have our numbers also to override that. If not, we're not going to create chaos inside the house. Let me tell you one thing.
That's democracy.
Anarchy is not allowed. It's democracy. Look at the US, for example, now. They have issues with the debt ceilings. They don't have the Democrats do not have the numbers in the House of Congress, in the House of Representatives. They just have to literally beg around and make so many concessions, do a lot of backroom, negotiations until they come to some kind. And the other guy stands firm. So this side gets what it wants, and this side also gets a respite, gets a breather. Now that is understandable.
All right.
You get my point. Now the other thing I want to have a problem with, serious problem with, is Parliament is an independent institution. This is not war. It's you represent your people to the best of your ability. You get my point? And you maintain freedom of thought. Freedom of thought. I have been in this house on and off for the last 30 years, my friend. I first came in 1992, end of 1992. Occasionally out of it for the wrong reasons, but anyway, we're not going to discuss that. So we have seen what Syria's despotism and oppression is in this country. You get my point? We've seen all sorts of things. Now,
which was your party in 1992?
Ford Kenya. The only opposition member of parliament that time was, you know what I mean, serious opposition member of parliament who refused to join KANU. With all the goodies that were available those days. But then, okay, progressively, then 1997, I went in there, and for whatever reasons, whether I lost fairly or I lost unfairly, the point is I was not in parliament that time. So I stayed out for 10 years, and then came back. You get my point? And then I stayed out for another 10 years. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that is the nature of democracy. You pay a certain price for your ideological persuasion, fairly or unfairly. You get my point?
Right.
So when you have a certain idea, and let me tell you one thing, and this is the thing that disturbs me about this country. I came in as a Ford Kenya member of parliament. My leader was Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. Jaramogi went into cooperation with Moi. I was never part of that discussions and deliberations. But the expectation at that time was that I should just follow wherever he goes. I don't have an independent mind of my own. I wait until the party leader decides where we are going to go, and then I go there. At that time, there were a number of goodies that were taken to Luo Nyanza because of that cooperation between Moi and it was very short, and you know, Jaramogi passed on. Then we rebelled. That's when I started forming the Safina Party, myself, Paul Mwite, Kiraitu Murungi, and the rest of them. You get my point?
Right.
And then, of course, they came to parliament at that time. Then there was the merger. You get my point? That was the merger. When Raila decided...
KANU and NDP.
Yeah, KANU and NDP. And I was still out in the open, the opposition. I was opposed to it. I was in Safina at that time, you know what I mean? And then, of course, later there was the Kibaki Tosha, which again was the two extremes coming together, but it's these big guys coming together. The rest of us are just supposed to be choir girls and choir boys, you know what I mean? And then there was the handshake. I'm not allowed to have my own handshake with Moi. I should have had my handshake with Moi because he looked for me like hell in 1993, but I said I have a political, ideological persuasion. I must stick by that. That's never worked in this country, let me be honest with you.
Right.
And now, if tomorrow there's a handshake between Raila and Ruto, all of us in Azimio will be expected to be clapping and say that's where we're going. You're not you represent a constituency. Each one of us represents a constituency. President ran for that thing. That constituency's priorities might be running counter to that handshake. You're not likely to get anything out of it. So the point I'm trying to tell you in a nutshell is that in this country, politics has got to be, we need to bear this thing and bring it out and say, this is how things should operate, and people have their independent positions. You're supposed, that's what democracy is about. It's not the herd instinct, you know what I mean? It's not the herd instinct.
I hear you, Honorable Farmali.
So if what do you call Moses Kuria's outbursts and Moses Kuria's remarks and his aggressive, confrontational issues are bad, they will cost Ruto at the end of the elections. And let's see how Kenyans see it. You'll be surprised. Sometimes many of them might see no fault with that. And that's how the nature of politics is.
I hear you. I want us to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll be diving into the conversation around, we understand that this afternoon, the National Assembly will be considering some amendments to the Finance Bill, but also reflecting on the Budget 2023-2024 and what the legislators here think of the priority areas as have been mentioned out with the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury, Professor Ndungu. After the break.